Picture this. You're sitting around the family dinner table. Someone mentions a new business idea, maybe a promotion they're going for, or just a really big dream for the future. And before the sentence is even finished, someone shoots it down. It happens instantly, almost like a reflex, usually right between passing the salt and the mashed potato.
Look closely at those 7 words. That's not for people like us. What's truly fascinating isn't just the phrase itself, but what happens immediately after it's spoken. There's no argument. Nobody asks for an explanation. It just acts as this automatic reflex that everyone at the table accepts as fact. The conversation moves on, but an invisible ceiling has just been lowered over the room.
You've likely heard these phrases before, maybe dressed up a little differently depending on where you grew up. We've never had money in this family, or rich people are just lucky, or the classic, don't get too big for your britches. And the quiet, somewhat scary reality of these phrases is that you probably started to believe them. Not because someone sat you down with a chalkboard and explicitly taught you this worldview, but because you heard them so many times, absorbed through pure repetition, until they became the soundtrack of your very identity.
So the crucial takeaway right up front is this. What we are talking about isn't merely a fleeting thought or bad mood. That is a generational script. It's an inherited mindset that masquerades as the absolute truth. But throughout this explainer, we are going to unpack exactly where this inherited scarcity comes from, how it operates mechanically in your mind, and most importantly, what God actually said about it.
Let's dive right into the mechanics. To really understand how this script works, we have to look at this anchor text from Proverbs 23:7. But before we just read the verse, let's set the stage. King Solomon wrote Proverbs during the absolute height of Israel's golden age. We are talking unprecedented wealth, massive political dominance, and huge cultural influence. Solomon himself was the wealthiest man to ever live up to that point. And yet, surrounded by all that tangible abundance, what does he choose to write about? The mind. He lived in a culture where generational patterns were deeply embedded. If your family was poor, poverty was your unquestioned inheritance. With this single sentence, Solomon pushes back against that entire systemic way of living.
The original language here reveals something absolutely game-changing. The word translated as thinketh in English is the Hebrew word sha'ar. It doesn't just mean a passing surface-level thought. In its root form, sha'ar means to calculate, to estimate, or to set a value on something. It's actually the exact same root word used for the gate of a city. In ancient times, the city gate was where commerce happened, where the value of goods was determined, and where all the major transactions were made. Solomon is literally telling us that your mind is an inner calculator. It is a gate, and whatever you allow through that gate sets the exact terms of trade for your entire life.
Now let's look at the second part of that equation. The word heart here is the Hebrew word lev. In our modern context, we almost always equate the heart strictly with emotion. But in the ancient Hebrew worldview, the lev was the center of the will, the intellect, and your primary decision-making faculty. It operates much closer to what we would call the deep subconscious mind today. It's the control room quietly governing your life decisions right beneath the surface of your awareness. Put those two concepts together, and this brilliantly illustrates what is actually happening inside of us. The full heavy weight of Proverbs 23:7 is saying this: whatever value you have calculated for yourself in your deepest inner world, that is exactly who you are becoming. The wider context of this proverb is Solomon describing a hypocritical host who offers you food but secretly resents you being there. His point is universal. What a person truly believes in their underlying calculating heart will always manifest, no matter what they say on the surface. Your external life is actively trading at the exact value you secretly set upon yourself.
This principle doesn't just live in Proverbs, though. Let's trace this thread back a bit. In Deuteronomy 18, God is speaking to Israel right before they enter the Promised Land. Now remember, Israel had just spent 40 years in the wilderness, 40 years surviving on daily manna, living in tents, operating purely in survival mode. A deep scarcity mindset was fundamentally baked into an entire generation. Notice what God does here. He doesn't just swing open the gates of Canaan and say, "Have at it." He has to address their 40-year baked-in scarcity mindset first. He explicitly tells them to remember who gives them the power, because if you don't fix the internal calculation first, you will walk right into the middle of abundance and continue to think and act exactly like a slave.
We see this exact same pattern continue straight into the New Testament. The Apostle Paul takes it a step further in 2 Corinthians 10:5. He talks about casting down imaginations. The Greek word he uses here is logismos. Do you know what that translates to? Reasonings, arguments, and calculations. It's the exact same conceptual framework as sha'ar in Proverbs. Paul is acknowledging that there are fortified strongholds of generational lack, these flawed calculations quietly running in the background of your mind that are actively set up against what God has said about you. And those calculations, they have to be actively fought and pulled down.
Which brings us right to Philippians 4:19, "But my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus." Notice the standard of measurement here. It is not according to your family's history, it is not according to the zip code you grew up in, and it is certainly not according to the limitations your ancestors accepted. The believer's supply line is securely connected directly to heaven. It entirely bypasses your bloodline, and it bypasses your neighborhood.
If you look at this through the lens of a ledger, you've got your family's history on one side. That represents the heavy, inherited ceiling of ancestral lack, the "we don't do that" and the "that's not for us." On the other side, you have the limitless reality of his riches and glory. These two ledgers absolutely cannot balance. One is an economic system based on sheer survival and limitation, the other is a divine economy based on infinite supply.
So this leaves us with a critical defining question. If God has already declared that he will supply all your needs according to his riches, why are you still calculating your life based on what your family never had? Who taught you that ceiling? Who set that exact price on your potential? And most importantly, when did you decide that your family's estimate of you was more accurate than God's?
The honest truth is, you inherited someone else's math. The generational lack you grew up around was undeniably real. The struggle your parents or grandparents faced was a harsh reality, and we aren't minimizing that for a second. But there is a massive difference between a season your family had to walk through and a permanent sentence you've accepted over your entire life. Your ancestors survived on lack, yes, but God never declared that lack as your permanent identity.
Romans 12:2 tells us not to be conformed to this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That word transformed is metamorpho in the original Greek. It's the exact same radical process that turns a caterpillar into something entirely different. You are not your family's limitation. You are no longer bound by the ceiling your family believed in. You are a completely new calculation written by the hand of God himself.
As you think in your heart, as you calculate in your deep subconscious will, so you shall be. It is time to close the gate on that old calculation. Not just your circumstances, but that internal estimate that says you're worth less than what God paid for you. The cycle breaks right here. If you're ready to stop accepting someone else's math and begin actively renewing your mind with the truth, I've put together the Faith and Freedom Starter Bundle. You can find everything you need to start this exact process in the description below. Go check it out and start calculating your true value today. Because if the creator of the universe hasn't put a ceiling on your life, why should you?